In the small village of Makoni, nestled deep in the heart of Zimbabwe, lived a man named Murambiwa. He was well known in his community, not for his charm or success, but for his extraordinary misfortune in love. No matter how hard he tried, no woman ever seemed to notice him, and those who did quickly lost interest. Murambiwa was a decent man, hard-working and respectful, but it seemed that love had turned a blind eye to him. At night, he would sit alone under the baobab tree, staring at the stars, wondering what he had done to be so cursed. As the years passed, his loneliness deepened. Friends and family began to whisper about his misfortune, and mothers even warned their daughters to stay away from him, fearing his bad luck might rub off on them. Desperation gnawed at Murambiwa's heart. One evening, after another failed attempt to win the affection of a village girl, Murambiwa made a decision that would change his life forever. He would seek the help of Ambuya Chenjerai, the legendary witch doctor who lived at the edge of the vast Chirinda forest. It was said that Ambuya Chenjerai's potions and charms were powerful enough to bend even the most stubborn of fates. The next morning, Murambiwa set out on his journey to find Ambuya Chenjerai. The path to Chirinda forest was treacherous, winding through dense underbrush and past rivers teeming with crocodiles. Villagers rarely ventured there, for it was believed to be a place where spirits roamed freely. But Murambiwa was determined. He would not let fear stand in his way. As he walked, the weight of his decision settled on him. He knew that dealing with Ambuya Chenjerai was dangerous. The witch doctor was known for her unpredictable nature and the heavy price she exacted for her services. But Murambiwa's longing for love was stronger than his fear. With each step, he rehearsed what he would say, hoping that the right words would persuade Ambuya Chenjerai to help him. After 2 days of walking, Murambiwa finally reached the outskirts of Chirinda forest. The air was thick with humidity, and the trees towered above him like ancient guardians. Somewhere deep within the forest, Ambuya Chenjerai's hut awaited. Murambiwa gathered his courage and entered the forest, each step taking him deeper into the unknown. Murambiwa wandered through the forest for hours, the oppressive silence weighing heavily on him. Just as he began to doubt whether he would find Ambuya Chenjerai, he came upon a clearing. In the center stood a small thatched hut, smoke curling from its chimney. Murambiwa's heart pounded in his chest as he approached the door, which was adorned with strange symbols and animal bones. He knocked timidly, and the door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of herbs and incense. Ambuya Chenjerai sat cross-legged in the center of the room, her eyes closed as she chanted in a language Murambiwa did not recognize. The witch doctor was an imposing figure, her face painted with white markings, and her hair twisted into intricate braids. She opened her eyes slowly and stared at Murambiwa, as if she had been expecting him. "What brings you here, child of Makoni?" Ambuya Chenjerai's voice was deep and resonant, sending shivers down Murambiwa's spine. Murambiwa swallowed his fear and spoke. "Ambuya, I have come seeking your help. I am unlucky in love, and I wish to change my fate. Please, give me a potion that would make me irresistible to the women in my village." Ambuya Chenjerai's gaze was piercing, as if she could see into Murambiwa's soul. She remained silent for what felt like an eternity before finally nodding. "Very well, but you know this. Such powers come with a price." Ambuya Chenjerai rose from her seat and began to gather various ingredients from around the hut. Murambiwa watched as the witch doctor combined roots, herbs, and animal parts into a bubbling cauldron. The mixture turned a deep crimson, and Murambiwa could feel the air around him growing heavy with magic. As Ambuya Chenjerai worked, she muttered incantations under her breath, her voice growing louder with each word. Finally, the potion was ready. Ambuya Chenjerai dipped a gourd into the cauldron and handed it to Murambiwa. The liquid inside glowed faintly, and Murambiwa hesitated, feeling a sudden sense of dread. "Drink it," Ambuya Chenjerai commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Murambiwa took the gourd and swallowed the potion in one gulp. It burned as it went down, but a warmth quickly spread through his body, making him feel invincible. Ambuya Chenjerai watched him closely. "You will find that women will no longer be able to resist you. But remember, all magic has a balance. What you have asked for may come with consequences you do not foresee." Murambiwa, blinded by the thought of finally finding love, dismissed the warning. He thanked Ambuya Chenjerai profusely and began his journey back to Makoni, his heart filled with hope for the first time in years. As Murambiwa made his way back to Makoni, he began to notice subtle changes in himself. He walked with a newfound confidence, and when he passed by the river and the streams, he saw that even his reflection looked different. His eyes seemed brighter, his posture stronger. By the time he reached the outskirts of the village, he was no longer the shy, awkward man he had been before. The first person he encountered was Matilda, a young woman who had never so much as glanced in his direction. As Murambiwa approached her, she looked up, her eyes widened with surprise and admiration. "Murambiwa," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. You look different today." Murambiwa smiled, feeling the potion's power coursing through him. "Do I? Perhaps you're finally seeing the real me," he replied, his voice smooth and confident. Matilda giggled, a reaction Murambiwa had never seen before. For the first time in his life, he felt in control, powerful even. As he continued through the village, more and more women began to notice him. Some whispered among themselves, while others approached him directly, eager to speak with him. Murambiwa was elated. The potion was working better than he had ever imagined. But as the day went on, Murambiwa started to notice something strange. It wasn't just the women who were drawn to him. Men, too, began to act oddly around him. They would stare at him with a mixture of admiration and longing, their behavior becoming more and more unsettling. Murambiwa tried to brush it off, focusing on the attention he was receiving from the women. But a small seed of unease had been planted in his mind. The next day, Murambiwa woke up feeling even more confident. He could hardly wait to see how the women in the village would respond to him. He dressed in his best clothes and set out into the village with a spring in his step. As he walked through the market, women flocked to him, vying for his attention. Murambiwa reveled in the attention, flirting and charming his way throughout the day. He felt like a king, and the villagers treated him as such. But as the day wore on, he noticed the men in the village growing increasingly strange. They began to follow him, their eyes filled with a mix of admiration and desire. Murambiwa tried to ignore them, but it became impossible when one of the men, Tonderai, a well-known hunter in the village, approached him. "Murambiwa," Tonderai said, his voice trembling slightly, "I can't stop thinking about you. I know it sounds crazy, but I think I'm in love with you." Murambiwa recoiled in shock. "What are you talking about? This is madness," backing away from Tonderai. But Tonderai's confession was just the beginning. Soon, other men in the village began to express similar feelings, leaving Murambiwa confused and horrified. He had wanted to be loved, but not like this. The attention from the women was still there, but now it was overshadowed by the increasingly aggressive advances from the men. Murambiwa realized with growing dread that something had gone terribly wrong with the potion. Days turned into weeks, and Murambiwa's situation grew more desperate. The attention he received from the women, once a source of joy, had become overwhelming. They would follow him everywhere, competing for his affection, sometimes even resorting to physical altercations. The once peaceful village of Makoni had become a battleground, with Murambiwa at the center of the chaos. But it was the men's obsession that truly terrified him. They too followed him constantly, their longing glances becoming more and more unsettling. Some of them had started to fight over him, just as the women had. Murambiwa could no longer walk through the village without being surrounded by a crowd, all of them vying for his attention. He tried to hide, but it was no use. Wherever he went, they would find him. His once beloved baobab tree, the place where he had found solace in his loneliness, was no longer a refuge. Now it was a place where the villagers would gather, waiting for him to emerge, each of them desperate to win his favor. Murambiwa's nights were filled with nightmares. He would dream of being trapped in a sea of faces, all staring at him with unblinking eyes, hands reaching out to touch him, to hold him. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding in his chest, the echoes of his dream clinging to him long after he awoke. His home had become a prison, the doors and windows barred to keep out the relentless suitors who would stand outside, calling his name, begging for a glimpse of him. The joy that the potion had initially brought him had turned into a living nightmare. Murambiwa began to understand Ambuya Chenjerai's warning. This power had indeed come with a price, and it was one he was not prepared to pay. As the days passed, Murambiwa realized he could not continue like this. The village that had once been his home had turned against him, and he was now a prisoner in his own life. His only hope was to find a way to reverse the effects of the potion. But Ambuya Chenjerai's hut was far, and the journey back through Chirinda forest was treacherous, especially with so many people following him at every step. One evening, under the cover of darkness, Murambiwa made his escape. He packed a small bag with food and water and slipped out of his home, hoping to leave the village before anyone noticed. But as he crept through the narrow valleys, he realized that his departure would not go unnoticed for long. Already, the villagers were searching for him, their voices echoing through the night. Murambiwa quickened his step, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he had to reach the forest before dawn, or he would be caught. The thought of him being dragged back to the village, or facing another day of relentless pursuit, filled him with terror. He ran faster, the shadows of the trees looming ahead, promising a brief respite from the harassment. Murambiwa finally reached the edge of Chirinda forest, just as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. He paused for a moment, catching his breath, and glanced back towards the village. In the distance, he could see the faint glow of torches and hear the voices of those who had noticed his absence. There was no time to lose. He plunged into the forest, the thick underbrush scratching his legs and the heavy canopy above blocking out the early morning light. The forest was as silent and eerie as he remembered, but this time Murambiwa felt no fear of the spirits. His only fear was that he might not find Ambuya Chenjerai in time. As he journeyed deeper into the forest, Murambiwa's mind raced with questions. Would Ambuya Chenjerai be able to help him? What if the witch doctor refused to reverse the curse? Or worse, what if the potion's effects could not be undone? Murambiwa tried to push these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the path ahead. He knew that his only chance of salvation lay with Ambuya Chenjerai. Hours passed as Murambiwa navigated the dense forest, his desperation growing with each step. Just as he began to despair of ever finding the witch doctor's hut, he caught sight of a familiar clearing through the trees. Relief washed over him as he approached the small thatched hut, the smoke curling from its chimney, a welcome sight. Murambiwa approached Ambuya Chenjerai's hut with a mix of fear and hope. He knew he had no other choice but to ask the witch doctor's help once more. Trembling, he knocked on the door, his heart hammering in his chest. The door creaked open, and there stood Ambuya Chenjerai, her expression unreadable. It was as if the witch doctor had known all along that Murambiwa would return. Without a word, Ambuya Chenjerai stepped aside, allowing Murambiwa to enter the dimly lit hut. Murambiwa fell to his knees before the witch doctor, his voice breaking with desperation. Ambuya Chenjerai, please, you must help me. The potion you gave me, it's not working as I'd hoped. The women, yes, they desire me, but so do the men. I am pursued night and day with no peace, no rest. I cannot live like this anymore. Please, I beg you, undo what you have done. Ambuya Chenjerai listened in silence, her eyes narrowing as Murambiwa spoke. When Murambiwa finished, the witch doctor sighed deeply and shook her head. I warned you, Murambiwa. Magic always comes with a price. You asked to be loved, to be irresistible, and that is what I gave you. But the heart does not distinguish between man and woman. You became the object of everyone's desire. But surely there's something you can do, Murambiwa pleaded, his voice trembling. I will pay whatever price you ask. Just please make it stop. Ambuya Chenjerai was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on Murambiwa. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with sorrow. There is a way to undo the potion, but it comes at a great cost. Are you prepared to pay it? Murambiwa nodded, desperation overshadowing his fear. I will do anything, he said. Ambuya Chenjerai stared deeply into Murambiwa's eyes, as if weighing his soul. Then, with a heavy sigh, the witch doctor moved to a small cabinet in the corner of the hut. From it, she retrieved a small vial filled with a dark, thick liquid. She held it up for Murambiwa to see, the liquid inside seeming to pulse with a life of its own. This, Ambuya Chenjerai said gravely, is the antidote. It will undo the effects of the potion, but it comes with a heavy price, far greater than what you have already paid. By drinking this, you will reverse the love and desire that others feel for you, but it will also strip you of your own capacity to love or be loved. You will walk this earth as a shadow, untouched by affection or companionship, but you will be free, yes, but alone for the rest of your days. Murambiwa felt a cold chill run through him. The weight of Ambuya Chenjerai's words pressed down on him, and he struggled to breathe. The idea of living without love, even without the possibility of it, was almost unbearable. But then he thought of the life he was currently living, the constant pursuit, the overwhelming obsession of those around him. And he knew he had no choice. It was this or continue living in a nightmare. He took the vial from Ambuya Chenjerai, his hands shaking. I will drink it, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Anything is better than this torment. Ambuya Chenjerai nodded, her expression somber. "Then may the spirits guide you, Murambiwa," she said. "This is your choice, and once made, it cannot be undone." With trembling hands, Murambiwa uncorked the vial and brought it to his lips. The liquid inside was bitter, coating his throat and his mouth as he swallowed it down. Almost immediately, he felt a coldness spread through his body, as if his very soul was being stripped away. He gasped, doubling over in pain as the potion took effect, tears streaming down his face as the last remnants of the warmth left him. When the pain finally subsided, Murambiwa collapsed on the floor, exhausted and empty. He felt different, as if a part of him had been hollowed out, leaving only a shell behind. Slowly, he got to his feet, his movements sluggish and numb. Ambuya Chenjerai watched him with a look of pity in her eyes. "It is done," the witch doctor said quietly. "You are free from the curse of desire. You will find that the villagers will no longer pursue you. But remember, Murambiwa, this freedom comes with a price. You will never again know the touch of love, the warmth of companionship. You are now as the wind, unseen, unnoticed, and alone." Murambiwa nodded, though his heart ached with the finality of the witch doctor's words. He knew that what he had done was irreversible. There would be no second chances, no hope for love in his future. But at least he would no longer be a prisoner of obsession, a plaything for the desires of others. With a heavy heart, Murambiwa thanked Ambuya Chenjerai and left the hut, stepping once more into the dense, silent forest. The journey back to Makoni was long and lonely, each step feeling heavier than the last. But Murambiwa pressed on, knowing that he could not stop now. He had made his choice, and he would have to live with it. When Murambiwa finally reached the village of Makoni, it was dusk. The villagers went about their evening routines, oblivious of his return. For a moment, he stood at the edge of the village, apprehensive, waiting for someone to notice him, to greet him, but no one did. He walked through the market, past the homes of those who had once pursued him with such fervor. Their eyes glanced over him, but none lingered. It was as if he had become invisible, a ghost wandering among the living. Murambiwa felt a deep sense of loss, but also a strange sense of relief. As the days turned into weeks, Murambiwa's life settled into a monotonous routine. He was no longer the center of attention, no longer hounded by desperate admirers. The villagers treated him as they did everyone else, polite but indifferent. To them, he was just another man in the village, nothing more, nothing less. Murambiwa returned to his old life, working in the fields during the day and spending his evenings under the baobab tree. But the joy he once found in solitude had faded, replaced by a hollow emptiness. He watched as couples walked by hand in hand, their laughter filling the air. Once these sights had filled him with longing, but now they only served as reminders of what he could never have. The potion had stripped him of more than just the attention of others. It had taken away his capacity to feel love. Murambiwa could no longer experience the warmth of affection, the thrill of attraction, or the comfort of companionship. Even his memories of past feelings had become dull, as if they belonged to someone else entirely. The world around him seemed muted, as if a veil had been drawn over his senses. Murambiwa tried to find solace in his work, throwing himself into his daily tasks with a single-minded focus. But no matter how hard he worked, he could not escape the emptiness that had settled deep within him. The villagers noticed his growing detachment, but they did not question it. To them, Murambiwa was simply a man who preferred his own company, nothing more. As the years passed, Murambiwa became a figure of quiet mystery in Makoni. The young children who had once been afraid of him no longer recognized him as the man who had caused such a stir. They grew up hearing stories about the man who had traveled to cheer in the forest and returned a changed person. But these stories soon faded into the fabric of the village's history, replaced by the new tales and new faces. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, Murambiwa sat beneath the baobab tree, staring up at the sky. The stars were beginning to emerge, twinkling faintly against the deepening blue. He found himself lost in thought, reflecting on the choices he had made and the life he had once lived. As he sat there, a faint rustling in the grass caught his attention. Murambiwa turned to see an old man approaching him, a stranger he had never seen before. The man's hair was as white as snow, his face deeply lined with age, yet there was a kindness in his eyes that made Murambiwa feel at ease. The old man sat beside him without a word, gazing up at the stars. For a long time, neither of them spoke, the silence between them comfortable and unforced. Finally, the old man broke the silence, his voice soft but clear. "You have lived a hard life, Murambiwa," he said, his eyes never leaving the sky. "You sought love, and in doing so, you lost yourself." Murambiwa nodded, surprised that the old man knew his name, but too tired to question it. "I made a choice, and now I live with it," he replied, his voice heavy with resignation. The old man turned to him, his gaze piercing but gentle. "There is a lesson in all things, Murambiwa. The spirits teach us through trials, through our pain. You have learned the power of desire and the emptiness that comes from chasing it without understanding its true nature." Murambiwa frowned, his brow furrowed in thought. "But what am I to do now? I am a man without love, without passion. I walk among the living, but I feel nothing. What lesson is there in that?" The old man smiled, a sad but knowing smile. "The lesson, Murambiwa, is that love cannot be forced, nor can it be possessed. It is a gift freely given, and in seeking to control it, you lost the very thing you desired. But take heart. Though you may not feel love again in this life, you have the wisdom to understand it, and that too is a gift." Murambiwa pondered the old man's words, a flicker of understanding beginning to dawn within him. The old man rose to his feet, his movements slow and deliberate. "Remember this, Murambiwa. Love is not a thing to be owned or controlled. It is a force of nature, like the wind or the rain, and it touches all who are open to it. Though your heart may be closed in this life, there is still hope in the next, and perhaps when that time comes, you will find the love you sought, not through magic or potions, but through the simple act of giving." With that, the old man turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness as suddenly as he had appeared. Murambiwa watched him go, a sense of peace settling over him. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, not for himself, but for the understanding he had gained. As the night deepened and the stars shone brightly overhead, Murambiwa knew that his journey was not over. Though he would live out his days in solitude, he had learned a truth that few ever come to understand, and in that truth he had found a measure of peace. Murambiwa continued to live quietly in Makoni, no longer seeking what could not be forced, but accepting the life he had chosen. And when his time finally came, he passed on with knowledge that love, true love, was a gift that could never be captured in a bottle or forced by magic, but one that must be nurtured, respected, and allowed to bloom in its own time. And so, the tale of Murambiwa, the man who sought to control love, became a cautionary story passed down through the generations, reminding all who heard it that the heart cannot be commanded, and that true love, when it comes, is worth waiting for.